Okay.
Thank you all for coming out. My name is Mindy Hudson. I work in the Genealogy Department here at the library. I'm also a member of the Bicentennial Committee. This is the Bicentennial of Jefferson County. And as a part of that, we've been having a series of speakers to come in and talk about various subjects on Jefferson County. And we are very, very pleased to have Joe Johnston here today. I want to begin it with you.
Careful.
We're very pleased to have Joe Johnston here today. He is an author. He is a musician. He was responsible for the creation of the Happy Meal, McDonald's Happy Meal concept. And he will be telling us a little bit about some of his kinfolks. Any of you who have ever been to any of my Murder and Mayhem presentations know that we have lots of murder and mayhem in Jefferson County history. He happens to be related to quite a lot of those people. And so today he's going to tell you a little bit about one of the most notorious murders that occurred around the 1880s. And it was Mack Marsden, and the Marsdens are still, they were here a very long time at the beginning of the creation of this county, and there are still descendants here today. Some of you may be descendants of the Marsdens and the Mosses and all of those families, and you're related to quite a number of them. So I would like for you please to welcome Joe Johnston.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Debbie Byron. Thank you, Ginger, everybody, for getting this organized. Appreciate it so much. I've actually been trying to come here for many years, so I'm glad we finally got this to make this happen. I was born in Jefferson County, so this is, my parents always, even though we moved to Oklahoma, my parents always came back here and brought me, so this is always homecoming for me, and I appreciate being here, and I appreciate all of you being here. This is interesting. I'm supposed to have my little notes here to refer to, and because of the setup, I don't have my notes, so I may get completely, I may start talking about World War II or something. Who knows, I may get completely lost, but we'll give it a shot. So the, you know, I love to talk, my cousin, oh my gosh, oh my God. Of course, y'all are probably my cousins too. If we track this back, this is my cousin, Paula Jean. Everybody say hi, Paula Jean.
Hi, Paula Jean.
For heaven's sake, what a surprise. What a nice surprise. Okay, so, okay. Love talking about history. And obviously you're people who are drawn to history. Why is that? Well, these people that we study are us. They're just like us in another place and time. So we can look at them and we can think, what would I have done? How would I have lived then? What would I have done in their circumstances? And that's why history is so enlightening. It tells us something about ourselves, not only where we came from, who we are, and where we're going. So the story that we're going to talk about today happened 135 years ago. This next month will be the anniversary of Mack Marsden's death. So that's really not that long ago. For some of us, it's maybe 6 generations. For some of us, maybe only 4. So it's not that long ago. And how many of you had family here around 1800 to 1810? Chris? Yeah. Okay, a few. How many have family? They almost, if you've had family here since then, they almost certainly knew some of the people in this story. How many of you had family here after the Civil War? Starting after the Civil War. A few more. Those people almost certainly, if they were here right from since that time, they almost certainly knew people in this story. And if your family was here in the 20th century, then they certainly knew some of these people. Even though the county got more populated, it wasn't that big. Okay, So let's get started, and we'll see if I can fumble through this without my notes. It wouldn't be the first time. Okay. So the name of the story is the Mack Marsden Murder Mystery, Vigilantism or Justice. And of course, vigilantes are people who take the law into their own hands. And so this story is probably a little bit of both, vigilantism and justice. This is what was going on at this time, 1881 to 83. Our ancestors had no deodorant, which really wasn't so bad because nobody had any deodorant. So, you know, you weren't missing anything. They had no zippers. During this period, Sitting Bull, who led the Sioux at the Battle of Little Bighorn, he surrendered during this time. Wyatt Earp was taming the Wild West out in Tombstone. And the first meeting of the Women's Christian Temperance Union in Missouri was held. And there were electric lights in St. Louis, a few. And in New York, Thomas Edison was running a steam-powered generator to supply electricity to New York. So while that was going on, of course, Jefferson County was rural. This is our hero, Mack Marsden. Mack was born in Jefferson County, grew up here. He came from a good family, attended one-room schools here. He lived, his parents had 3 homes here, but the one where he grew up was in the trees at the back of this picture. They farmed this cornfield. Behind those trees, if you know where Lake Lorraine, I'm sorry. Lake Lorraine is behind, that's the dam, is behind those trees. At that time, it was probably a spring-fed lake or pond of some sort, I don't know. But it took that man-made dam and turned it into a lake. So it was not there when Mack was growing up. Mack was a baseball fan. He liked to travel up to St. Louis and watch the St. Louis Browns play, forerunners of the Cardinals. He would go up there, and they played at Sportsman's Park, which was one of the most historic things in American history. This is where, during this era, was where beer was first served at a baseball game. That's all we need to say. Thank you. So, Augie. So, yeah, thanks, Augie. It wasn't Augie, it was the owner of the Browns, who also owned the ballpark. I can't remember his name. Anyway, so Mack would go up there and go to ball games. His family, as I said, was pretty well known in the neighborhood. Mack's father was a mining engineer. His family came here from mining. You know, there were lead mines from kind of Goldman down toward Hillsborough. That didn't keep his dad busy. His dad was hired by the county to survey Lee May Ferry Road. Now, this is really an important element in the settling of the county because, you know, the county seat was moved from Herculaneum to Hillsborough, which is out in the middle of nowhere. And so a lot of people had to go to and from St. Louis for legal business especially, and commerce, but also legal business. The Lee May Ferry Road was a cattle trail, so it wound and so forth. Samuel Marsden's job was to straighten it out, grade down some of the hills, and then it was gravelled to become the Lee May Ferry Road that we know now. Of course, it's been moved a little bit to straighten more. So everybody knew him for that. And then when people would come down to make that trip between Hillsborough and St. Louis, they had to cross Sandy Creek someplace. There was a natural ford here, but in the spring it would rain and they could be flooded sometimes for days. People couldn't get across. They had to build a bridge, so they built the beautiful red-covered bridge. It stands there today. It was wiped out and, of course, rebuilt using about half the original timbers. Mack's dad was the commissioner on that bridge. So that means he hired the workers, paid them, he bought all the materials and that sort of thing. So everybody knew the Marsden family. Mack's wife was Imogene Hensley, and her parents were among the founders of Sandy Baptist Church. You may be familiar with this. It's about 2.5 miles from the covered bridge. They built one church that burned, and this is the second church they built, which stands today and is still in use. So that's an introduction to Mack's family. Now, a lot of people want to know how I got interested in this and why I felt led to research it and find out what it was all about. This pistol was in a frame and hanging in my uncle's study when I was growing up. So, of course, I had to know what that was all about, and this is basically the story that I was told by my uncle. My grandfather, my uncle's grandfather, was a livestock dealer, and he knew that his cousins had been stealing some pigs. So when the sheriff arrested him, they thought he was stealing the pigs too, and he said, "No, I will testify against my cousins because I'm not one of the pig thieves." And before the trial of his cousins for pig stealing, he was shot and killed on the Lee Nay Ferry Road. He was carrying that pistol in his pocket at the time. He carried it every place he went. So that's the story I got. As I grew older and became more interested in history and genealogy, I thought, well, I just need to know more about that. Our family needs to know more about that. And look at all the other families who need to know about it. So I started researching it, and I'm going to tell you this. First of all, I'm not going to say that, but I will say, when I started this research, I got in touch with somebody in the know in Jefferson County, that one of the first things that I heard was, Mack was accused of being a desperado. Are you okay with hearing the rest of this story? I said, thank you very much. No, I said, sure. That's what you have to be prepared for. If you're going to get into your genealogy, you got to take whatever comes. So I said, sure. And so that's where the story led. Anyway, okay, there we have that. Okay, I'll tell you how this happened. There was a crime wave. I'm sorry, my hair looked great this morning. There was a crime wave in Jefferson County that started with an arson fire in a shed on the property of J.T. Moss in Moss Hollow, which is between Barnhart and Hillsborough out there off Highway M. It was an unused shed, so the sheriff at J.T. Moss couldn't figure out why anybody would set a fire there, or if J.T. knew, he wasn't telling. Well, that was followed by some more arson fires, some burglaries, and some burglaries that somebody tried to cover up with an arson fire. That was getting kind of pesky, and livestock started disappearing around the county. Most people raised pigs. Family might have a calf to butcher, but there's not a lot of cattle raising here, not a lot of sheep or goats, but a lot of pigs. People were stealing pigs. Sheriff John Weaver couldn't figure it out, so the newspaper, okay, I'm sorry, I did need my notes, didn't I? In the fall of 1881, there was a fire at a cabin, at a house on, I can't remember that. The man who owned that house was Anson Vale. Anson Vale moved here from New York with a lot of money, and his business in Jefferson County was loaning that money to people. He made his living off the interest. Everybody had to put up a chattel, or what we call collateral, so people couldn't pay. He just collected their livestock or their feed or whatever they had put up for chattel. So Anson Vale was rocking. He had a lot of money. He had a lot of livestock. He had feed and hay in the barn, and he had a man who worked the place for him. So when that fire burned down his house, and the sheriff went to investigate, they found Anson Vale dead in the house, and he had been murdered. So that was a big deal. That's a lot worse than stealing pigs. Sheriff John Weaver started asking around the neighborhood if anybody had seen anything, and everybody said, yeah, Mack Marsden went over there last night. Well, Mack Marsden told the sheriff, of course I did. I borrowed some money from Vale. I bought a horse. I sold that horse at a nice profit, and I was very proud to go repay that loan to Anson Vale. On his way over there, he waved to people. He stopped and talked to neighbors. It wasn't the behavior of somebody who would sneak over in the middle of the night. with somebody who was going over to do some business. Well, Sheriff Weaver knew that if he just kept investigating, he could hang this murder on Mack. At the same time, the publisher of the newspaper, the Jefferson Democrat, ran a long article detailing all of these crimes in the neighborhood and saying all these crimes have been laid at Mack Marsden's door. Why is that? Why would he accuse Mack? There were rumors all over the county. Every time pigs would disappear, every time there was a fire, every time there was a burglary, there were rumors that Mack did it, which is really odd because the victims of a lot of these burglaries and arson fires were members of his wife's family, the Hensleys. It just didn't make sense. These are some of the families that were involved in this story. Do you see your family up here? You do.
Joseph.
Who are you?
Joseph Yerger.
How are you related to Joseph?
He's my great-great-grandfather.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh, this is great. What's your name?
Lee.
Lee?
Lee.
Oh, you.
Lee, I would say, how can I go back? Beats being to Yerger, yes.
Wow. Oh, that is so cool. Oh, we have a celebrity here. Yes.
I'm related to both. I'm related to the Yergers and through the Marstons and through the Moss. I'm not really related to the Moss, but my great-grandmother bought the Moss farm down in
Who are you?
I'm Marge Smith. I used to be a holiday. Lee is my cousin.
Wow. Oh, this is so great. When do y'all hear this? This is great. So y'all are in the same boat with us. Your ancestors are tied up and stuff. Okay. So these are some of these families. Now, in the book, you'll find this, which is sort of a family tree / spider web. This is really just 4 families: Moss, Johnston, Hensley, and Marsden. And these little gray lines are marriages between these families. So you can see how tied together these 4 families were. And this is not all the kids and not all the marriages. And of course, these people married other people too. But this is just a little glimpse. Now, I'm going to do a very quick breakdown on this. Benjamin Johnston and Billy Thomas were married to Billy Moss were married to the Thomas sisters. They came here from Kentucky as soon as they could get a land grant here from the girl's father, about 1802. In Moss's line, which this is a beautiful family, I mean, just full of personalities, very colorful. These 2 guys stand out in the story, Tommy and Jimmy Moss. This is JT, who owned a ton of land, was in the real estate business. He bought and sold property to lots of people, had lots of friends. You know how real estate agents are. You know, he was one of those guys. Okay. Benjamin Johnston's family includes Mary Johnston, who was Mack Marsden's mother. Jesse, her brother, was in the livestock business with Mack, and Gabe, who's a cousin, was one of his best friends. Max, I'll get back, I'm about to hit that. This is the Hensley family, his wife. There's Imogene, her brother Allie was Mack's partner in his livestock business. I'm wearing myself out. These are the 3 Marsden brothers who moved here. Samuel is Mack's dad. There's Mack and his brother Buzz. That's not his real name. Marsden's like nicknames. All these kids have nicknames. So Mack and Buzz. Richard was also a mining engineer, but he was tired of that and started a livestock business. Very successful. He taught Mack how to run that business, got him started. George was the ne'er-do-well branch of the family. George was a rambling man. He left his wife, Eliza Peppers, in Washington County. He cohabitated with Louisa Owens until they were sued by their friends and neighbors, friends and family for cohabitating, and had to get married. But they had already had several children, or some children, including John and Alan Marsden. Oh, well, they got divorced in Washington. He went off and left her in Washington County. They probably got divorced first. Okay, so anyway, they got married. So these two guys, you'll notice, have red arrows like Jimmy and Tommy Moss did. Okay. Everybody confused? Okay, there are a couple of maps in the book to give you an idea where all these things happen. Here's the river. Here's Peevely. The covered bridge is right there. Sandy Baptist Church is there. Hillsborough, Victoria. You know, the train came down the river. Nobody planned on it going to the county seat at Hillsborough, so we went to Victoria, Minnesota. So Mack's cousin Cornelius ran a stagecoach line. Twice a day, he'd go back and forth between Victoria and Hillsborough, where people had business at the courthouse. This map in the book focuses in on the area around the covered bridge. So y'all are going to view, if you haven't read the book, after this you're going to view the covered bridge with different eyes now, because it was the center of a lot of activity in this community. There's the covered bridge. The Hensleys lived right here beside it. That's Mack's wife's family. There's the home where Mack lived with his parents at the north end of the cornfield. Over here is the home of Vale, the man who was murdered in his cabin, his house burned. Right across the road, you see who lives there? Louisa Marsden. That's the mother of John and Alan Marsden. The plot thickens. So, with Mack accused of murdering Vale, there was no evidence to bring him to trial. The sheriff and the district attorney, there was a man named Green, worked really hard on this. Couldn't find any evidence, couldn't find anything. Finally, who walks into the sheriff's office? Joseph Yerger. Joseph Yerger was a very successful merchant in Antonia. His brother was the mayor. Joseph, you may say something? Oh, you look like you're about to speak.
Although that's kind of connected with my family too.
And how's that?
Well, the Yergers and the Friedmans came together from Germany, and my Friedmans was part of the vigilante group.
We could choose up sides and have a we could act this out. By the way, we ate at, is it Das Vivo, the windmill place in St. Louis? Oh man, it's German food, I'll tell you. Okay, so back to the story. Joseph Yerger had a big general store. Upstairs was a hotel, and he and his family also made their home up there. He had a lumber yard and a livestock yard. He was kind of Walmart today. One night, the family is asleep and they're awakened by a fire downstairs in the store. Everyone gets out safely. That's a good thing. Joseph goes to the water pump and is filling buckets as fast as he can. As the neighbors all come to take buckets and try to put out the fire, suddenly in the darkness, bam, a shotgun rings out. Joseph falls to the dust. His neighbors rush over, they pick him up, they carry him next door to the Heiletag's house, put him on the dining table, and in a few minutes he passes away. It's dark, nobody knows who shot him. So the significance of this in Mack's story is that Joseph had gone to Sheriff Weaver and said, I have the evidence that Mack Marsden killed Anson Vale. The evidence was some paper money that had been torn. Joseph, being a merchant, he patched that money with packing tape. In a transaction, he had paid that money to Anson Vale. Later, after Vale was murdered, Mack came into Yerger's store and spent some of that patched money. And Yerger accused him on the spot. He said, you killed Anson Vale, that's Vale's money. And Mack threatened him right back. He said, you should be careful who you make accusations about. So there's the tension. The sheriff and the DA want to hang Mack Marsden. Joseph Yerger is the witness who can place that money in Mack's hands, and somebody kills Yerger. Did Mack kill him to keep him from testifying? Well, they held the trial. Mack was tried for murder. Nobody could really present that torn money evidence. There was no other evidence tying him to the crime, so Mack was acquitted. Acquittal is not guilty or innocent. It's a finding that we don't have enough evidence to determine guilt or innocence. So he was acquitted. Okay. So here we are with an unsolved murder. And then, not only is Mack being accused of stealing pigs, but his father was fed up with it. His father, Samuel, knew people in the county. He was respected. He got people's attention. He went to the newspaper. He went to the sheriff. Everybody knew. And he said, it's not Mack stealing those pigs. It's his cousins, John and Alan, the sons of George Marsden. And there are two of these Moss boys. There's one of these Moss boys in it too, Tommy Moss. So, got accusations flying all over. No evidence. Nobody's been seen stealing pigs or anything. John Marsden and Mack Marsden are both arrested. They both bail out of jail. They're both arrested again. John bails out again. Mack has a bond hearing in DeSoto. There's something really fishy about that because Hillsboro's the county seat. It's full of judges. It's full of, the county is full of justices of the peace. Why would they take Mack to DeSoto for a bond hearing? But that's what they did. Sheriff Weaver rode down there with him alone, just the two of them. But Mack's father was not going to let that happen, so Mack's father and his uncle and his brother all rode down there carrying their rifles to guard Mack while they went down for this bond hearing. He has the bond hearing in DeSoto, gets out on bond, and the four Marsdens begin the ride home and to where they lived up by the covered bridge. As they crossed the railroad tracks at Victoria, some riders galloped out of the trees, dozens of riders. And the Marsdens knew what was up. They were people who were going to lynch Mack. So the Marsdens took off galloping up the Victoria Road. They galloped all the way past Hillsboro, all the way up to the covered bridge. And the posse, all these vigilantes, are chasing all the way. The Marsdens thunder across the covered bridge. They wheel their horses. Mack pulls out his little silver engraved pocket pistol and fires 3 shots in the air. And he says, "You boys have been mighty brave so far. Who's going to be first?" Well, the posse wasn't going to press that, so they all turned around and went back home. But the tension again went up higher in the county. That's when the newspaper publisher called for a vigilante committee. You like this part?
Well, the part about the newspaper reporter that reported.
Oh, yeah.
that
Well, what she's talking about is when that happened, there was a reporter in DeSoto from St. Louis who came down for this bond hearing, and he saw the Marsdens ride out of town, and he was disappointed because nothing had happened. But he had been told about the vigilantes. And so he wrote a story assuming that the vigilantes were going to catch Mack and hang him. And that's the story that he filed at the Post-Dispatch, which was picked up by the New York Times. Mack was hanged. Well, he wasn't there. Okay, thanks. That's a good
That's
story.
my favorite part.
Okay, so how do we get these vigilantes? How do all these people get organized? The day before the bond hearing, the newspaper publisher put an article in the paper that said, it called men to rise up as a vigilante committee, and that night, over 100 men showed up at a barn outside of Hillsboro. They signed a pact that they would clean up the county, even if it meant breaking the law. So those were the men who came boiling out of the trees the next day to chase Mack. Pretty good story so far, huh? Okay, sorry. So this painting, which is on the cover of the book, depicts that the end of the chase at the covered bridge. That's what the vigilantes would have seen facing. So, what do we have next? Okay. So with all this going on, Mack was accused of pig stealing. John Marsden and Alan Marsden, his brother, are accused of pig stealing. They're coming up for trial, and Mack has agreed to testify against them. It's in August. The trial was 2 weeks away. Mack and Allie, his brother-in-law, who's in the livestock business with him, had been to St. Louis and probably took in a ball game, drank a couple of beers, and we're coming back on the Lee May Ferry. It was just about noon. Coming back on the Lee May Ferry Road. Mack's wagon, which was pulled by a horse, was what they call a spring wagon, a small wagon with just a tiny little cargo there. 3 men stepped out of the trees, 2 of them armed with rifles and 1 with a shotgun. Mack stopped the horse. He said, "Don't shoot, boys." The man with the shotgun opened up. Blam! And Mack fell dead in the dust of Lee May Ferry Road. Blam! He fired again, and Allie fell over the seat into the bed of the wagon. The horse bolted and ran all the way into Antonia, where the people of Antonia stopped him in the street. Allie lived long enough to name his killers. The killers he named were John and Alan Marsden, Tommy and Jimmy Moss. There were only 3 men on the road, so I'll leave that for you to figure out in the book. Later on, they didn't have enough evidence to bring those men to trial for murder, so that never happened. A lot of people thought the county was better off with Mack dead, so they left it at that. John Marsden still had to stand trial for stealing pigs. He was found guilty and was sent to prison at the state pen in Jefferson City for 4 months. And of course, the governor at that time, help me out.
Fletcher? Wasn't
No.
not after Marvin?
Darn, I wish I hadn't said that. Anyway, he acquitted a lot of people. He's the one that made the deal for Jesse James Kelly before. Anyhow, so he was known for making deals like that. So John Marsden went to prison, got out of prison. A couple of years later, we had a new sheriff. His name was Herpin. And if you all are familiar with the beautiful fence around the Hillsborough Cemetery, Herpin was the blacksmith who designed and built that fence. He was kind of a crusading guy. And it seems that he got it under his saddle got a burr under his saddle to solve this mystery. So he ran for sheriff, was elected sheriff. He tracked the Marsdens down. All those guys, John, Alan, Jimmy, and Tommy, all moved to Arkansas. The crime wave ended in the county. So did the crime wave end because Mack was dead? Or did the crime wave end because John, Alan, Jimmy, and Tommy left the state? Well, Sheriff Herpin arrested him, brought him back. They stood trial for murder, and they were acquitted. So no one has ever been punished for Mack Marsden's murder. Now, let me see. I'm going to skip this for now. This is Fidelio Rogers. We don't have any Fidelio Rogers family here. They're coming to one of these events, so I'll tell that. This is an innocent guy who got sucked into this.
Could you tell that story, please?
Oh my God!
Because there is a holiday connection with that.
Yes, there is. Okay, I'm going to make it brief.
Yes.
Okay. This guy with the unusual name of Fidelio, that everybody called Fidelio, was married to Elizabeth Purchase. Is that her name?
I just know it was a Rogers.
And he was they had a really nice farm. He was known for having a Percheron stallion, which was in demand as for breeding draft horses, draft animals. And unfortunately, he had an in-law named Gilman. Gilman was one of those apparently one of those guys who hangs around the bad guys. He wants to be bad, but he's not really bad enough to be one of them. So he's the kind of guy who liked to talk about stuff. You know, he'd hear people talk about something and he'd tell somebody else. And it's very fuzzy what went on, what he knew and what he didn't know. He was good friends with John and Alan Marsden. He got crossways with his in-law, Fidelio Rogers. Fidelio's barn was burned. Fidelio was shot at. Gilman, the in-law, was shot at. And then Gilman left the county. Gilman went to a private eye, found a private eye in St. Louis, and told the private eye that he shot Yerger. The Fidelio Rogers killed the merchant, Joseph Yerger, at the home. Well, why would he do that? They came down, the private eye came down here, arrested Fidelio Rogers for that murder, and the DA could find no evidence to support, so he dropped the charges. And then moved to Alaska later on and wrote to their mother and had a wonderful life. So it's just a case of somebody totally innocent being pulled into this mess. That's a short version. Is that okay?
And Hyla Takes hid Fidelio when authorities were involved
Here.
in India.
Okay, if y'all didn't hear that, she said that the Hyla Tags, who were related to,
Well, they lived across the street from the Yergers.
yeah, they lived by the
And they
Yergers.
went over to help save the family and the children.
Right, yeah.
And
So when he was
she said-
accused of murder, the Hyla Tags hid him
They came
from
looking for
authorities.
Fidelio, but it was the Hyla Takes that did it.
Nice. Very good. I love that. Okay. Mack Marsden's family continued to prosper. This is his brother Buzz. This is his widow, Imogene. This is a cousin. He's not their child. However, they did marry in their later years, his brother and his widow. This is Mack's son at the top of this picture, Sammy Marsden, who was one of the finest men I've ever known. He became Hillsboro's postmaster. The fellow in this corner is my uncle who had the pistol and told me the original story. The lady in that cousin is Leela Marsden Jacobs, who taught in one-room schools around here for many years, and I've known many people who had her as a teacher. This is Paula Jean's mother.
You're right.
There. These are twins. This is Paula Jean's mother, and this is their mother. This is the youngest Forrest. So anyway, they're just a wonderful family. They're not murderers, grandchildren. And just a couple of other notes about this. You find out things as you go through the research. I found out this stuff about Fidelio late and some other things. And going back to the Yerger murder, Joseph had a branch store at what we now call Goldman, which was called Sandy at that time. That store was run by a man named Martin Zimfer. After Joseph was killed, Martin Zimfer closed that store, moved all the merchandise up to the main store, which had been rebuilt, moved into the hotel upstairs, and about a year later, Martin and the widow Yerger got married. So, since the book came out, I have received letters from both the Yerger family and the Zimfer family telling me that Zimfer is the one who shot Joseph Yerger at the pump.
Oh, wow.
And he did it because he and the widow, the future widow, had been carrying on. What's interesting to me about the letters is that the one letter was very indignant about the fact that they got married and that he had shot Joseph. The other letter was very indignant that they had an affair before he shot Joseph. It's all about what's important. If you want to buy my book, this is my book. It's $24. It has received the Independent Publishers Award for True Crime. These are my other books in this series, vigilante books, Mr. Evil and It Ends Here. Both of those have received the Will Rogers Medallion for Western nonfiction. This is my latest book, which I also have here, called Grits to Glory, How Southern Cooking Got So Good. Nobody gets killed in this book.
Well, the pig.
But from the cooking, it's not a recipe book, it's not a cookbook, it's a history book, history of Southern food. And my book tour is being sponsored by Lodge Cast Iron. So I am going to give away 2 of these Dutch oven cooking books. Among the things that Lodge makes, they make a Dutch oven. And this is some literature about this if you want. Who has the little...
I can find those for you if you
Okay,
like.
yeah, could you pass those up? Somebody put them in a hat. And I'm going to give away 2 of these books.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, that's all I got. Questions? Who wants to guess?
Could you go back with the 2
Did you
teachers?
have one though? I'll come back to you.
What were their names?
You're fine, I'll come back
And
to you.
Floyd.
If y'all can pass those down for me, that'd be easier.
Vern and Floyd and Lee.
Oh, well, hey, I'll be going back over there, so that's fine.
Elizabeth Floyd.
Elizabeth
And
Floyd
Imogen Fern.
and Imogene Furman.
And Uncle Ware was Willis Ware.
Willis Ware.
Thank you.
And Leila. Remember what
Thank
her
you very much.
Thelma.
Yours went that way, perfect. Did yours go that way? I'll come down. Oh, they're coming
I
down.
did here.
No, they're fine, thank you.
I was just curious because I had their book for a teacher,
Leila,
Floyd.
you had Floyd for this.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh. Where was this?
in Herculean. Actually, I have her teaching contract.
You have what?
A teaching contract to sign.
No kidding. She taught for probably 100 years. 100 years. You hear that? Leila was his first grade teacher at Hillsborough. And by the way, Marsden, Ware Marsden and his wife Virginia taught at Hillsborough High School. Well, they taught at Hillsborough School, and they were worked on the building of the new funding,
Making
building
it
a
a
new
high school.
making a high school offering those classes.
Before that, they had to drive to DeSoto.
Yeah, my mother, all these children, I don't know about Forrest, but all the older children, my mother, all graduated from DeSoto High School. That's where people had to go for high school. Yes, sir.
That list of the 4 families all the way down there. Sam Byrne on it. Our names don't know. You know about
Okay, Sam Byrne. He's in the Mosses, right?
He's on the right, he's on the first list, right in the middle. And list of Sam Byrne.
Throw him in there and draw it. Okay? I'm gonna look that up for you. Okay, Ginger's gonna draw for the 2 cookbooks.
And I'll see you in the next.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, one, Christine Merciel.
All right.
I did not look, I promise.
Number 2, Bernard Laban.
Yay!
I swear it's not very
Okay, now the question is, who is this guy, Sam Burns? How's he in the story? And I apologize that I have forgotten. Oh, he's in here a bunch. Let me see if I can recall quickly. Does anybody else have a question while I'm looking this up?
I don't know the situation, someone in the county seat wanted to have vigilantes And they kind of said, go out, but are there ever any names recorded as to who went in that vigilante group?
Chris?
Yes.
How do you know that the Freedmen were in the vigilantes?
Well, I'm not 100% sure that he was in this vigilante group, but in Antonio, there was a non-theft
The anti-horse thief?
yeah,
That's the one.
association, and he was a founding member of that.
That was in Antonia?
That was in
Yes.
Antonio.
That's a good
And it was
song.
right around the same time, so I kind of assumed that was the beginning of it.
We have a list of the names. They were in the paper.
Right, that might be different, it may be.
You know, the Anti-Horse Thief League was founded actually right before the Civil War, kind of dropped and then rejuvenated after the Civil War. So I would bet it's a different group of people, but I've never seen a list. However, I'll tell you, this is a good story about research. As we were winding this down and everything was kind of falling together, but there were still some loose ends and some things didn't make sense. I was at the Festus Library in the genealogy room with Lisa Lewis Gendron, who I'm sure a lot of you know, and she was helping me look for anything we could find that was related. We were about to give a walkout, and she said, "Joe, look at this." And she had found the newspaper article where the publisher called for the men to meet at the barn and form a vigilance committee. So it just tied everything together. Pretty amazing. That's the way research is. You go, oh, well, everything makes sense now. Yes, sir.
I just got a comment to make. My son bought what was left of the Marsden farm and lives there now.
Shots?
Yes.
Did Joe Shots dad?
Yes.
Oh, my God. Joe Shots dad.
Oh,
Yeah, Paul, good to know you. How about that?
the comment that I was going to make is he's done some research on the people that have lived there since, well, Dick Marsden was the last one to live there. And Betty is buried in the backyard.
Right.
And-
So's Dick.
No, Dick's in an urn in the barn. Yes. So Kathy Marsden is who
Right.
Joe bought the
farm.
50 acres through. Another person was in between, but Kathy Marsden was the last one,
Right.
the last child left because Dick's son had died.
Right.
All right, so the story goes, he called Kathy and he said, "What do you want me to do with your dad's ashes? Do you want me to dig a hole next to the gravesite?" Because there's a headstone there.
Yeah.
You put it in the ground next to him. And she said, "Don't you do that." And he said, "Why?" She said, "Mom will come back and haunt you." Honest to God, I swear, this is the truth. So the ashes are still in the urn, still in the barn, because Joe don't know what to do with them. He don't know whether to spread them out in the field, or he don't know what to do.
He doesn't know what would make the old lady mad.
And the other story goes, and he hasn't been able to find out if this is true or not, is that Betty had a 63 or a 65 red Carrera convertible. And she said, "When I die, bury me in that car in the backyard." Now there's a plot back there, a zoysia grass, that would be about the size of a vehicle, well, more than that now. But that's the only place there's zoysia grass in that backyard. And it's right there by that headstone, out into the yard. Well, I told him to get a metal detector and see if
There's
there's a car buried there.
Ground penetrating radar.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, did Kathy die?
No, Kathy's got MS. She lives up a
Yeah,
half and
that's
half.
right. So who would be in the Corvair?
Her mom.
Oh, it was her
Betty.
mom.
Yes, her mom.
Okay, so, oh my God.
The other thing is that the story goes is that Mack Marsden's dad cursed that house and that property. And there have been 5 different families that have lived there that have lost their oldest child.
Wow.
Has been killed while their mom and dad were alive.
That's scary.
Did he backtrack? Did he verify all that?
Yes, he did.
Oh, we've got a Halloween tour, don't we?
He's done a lot of research.
Ginger and I are like, what?
Oh, this is new. This might be another book.
And Luke, he's still living in the old house, in the grandfather's
Right.
house. before you get to
Right, yeah.
the log cabin that Joe and his wife lived in. And Lukey's son just got killed a year ago, this past February, and he was like 25. And they've lived in that house like 30 years, the Lukey's son. And he's got a daughter and a son. His son was the oldest. And you go back 4 other families in the same kind of house. And that was the story that Kathy had said, is that she had heard that Mack Marsden's dad had cursed that house and that property. And that, everybody has lost.
Why he would do that?
Because she said that Mack Marsden was not the horse thief and the pig thief that everybody said he was.
Right.
And it made him so mad that they killed him because of that. And then he cursed that property. And supposedly he went to his death trying to prove that his son was innocent. It never happened.
What I wanted to ask you is to talk a little bit about Alan and John about their meeting in, I guess it was DeSoto, when they were planning what they were going to do. Oh, okay, that's fine. That's in the book. You need to get the book. That's fine.
If you don't mind.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
The question was asked about Sam Burns.
Yeah.
There he is. Sam Burns was an attorney. He knew the Moss family very well. He put up some bail money for some of them. He represented some of them. And if I recall correctly, when John and Alan had to leave the state to save their necks, everybody, the Mack's side of the family would have killed them just like they would have killed Mack's side of the family, And when they left, Sam Burns bought their land at auction. So, since he was so close to the family, there was some kind of an inside deal there.
Was it in relation to the Burns Mill? Would that be the burn from that area? Did they move it to Sam Burns for the Burns Mill area?
Burns, where is that?
On top of Highway 12.
Down by House Springs.
House Springs.
That's right, Hot Springs.
Possibly, possibly. The Mosses didn't live there, they lived over on Matt's side.
Oh, okay.
It could be.
Small community.
Yeah, it could be.
An interesting little tidbit, I think, is I know that in the family there was not, like when Zipford married the widow of Joseph, but they are all buried in the Antonia Cemetery. And the Antonia Cemetery is really the Anton Murder Cemetery. That's how it's named. And it was started by Anton Murder's wife,
Antonia.
Yes, and so when you enter that cemetery, there are 2 stones to your left, 2 obelisks for Anton and his wife Antonia. And on the other side, only separated by the driveway, are 3 obelisk stones of Martin Zipford, the widow of Joseph Yerger, and Joseph Yerger.
Well, if I wanted to hush things up and make everything nice the best I could, I'd give them all 3 an obelisk,
Yeah, and I don't know, the dates. I'd have to check the dates to see who did what when. Because Anton obviously died after Joseph, but he was older than Joseph.
Now, Fidelio Rogers was not that nice. He is buried with his wife and I think it's her brother who was the bad guy, or her brother-in-law. Anyway, he's buried there too, but he didn't get a stone. So it works the other way too.
Not even a stone?
Not even a stone.
Anything
Anything else?
Do you by chance own Mack Marsden's pistol? Who has the pistol that your uncle had?
Terry.
How do I say it? Yeah, Terry, how do I say it? Mack
Oh, okay.
Marsden's great-granddaughter.
Oh, okay.
Great.
Great.
I'm great.
Where? You're great.
Yeah. So she-
You're great. Terry's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, great-great-granddaughter. She lives in Oklahoma City. Yeah.
Have you ever been able to locate Mack Marsden's grave?
Good question. Samuel, his dad, asked when he died to be buried at the entrance to the mine. Isn't that romantic? Bury me at the entrance to the mine. Well, the mine, I had the map here in front of me. The mine north entrance, it's just in the ground. This isn't like in the movies where it's some big hole in the side of a mountain. It's a hole in the ground. It goes into a bank and back underground. That is near Lee May Ferry Road, a half mile from the covered bridge. There's a street there called Sunrise or Sunlight. Anybody familiar with that? Sunrise. It's S-O-N. It's like somebody was talking
It's right
about
across
Jesus.
from Marsden Lane.
Yeah, across from Marsden Lane. Sunrise or Sunlight, something like
Right.
that. That goes back a little ways and then stops. If you walk down into that field, there's a little cemetery there.
Yes.
With Johnston stone and a couple of, maybe 2 or 3 stones there. But that's very near the entrance to the mine at the north end, and we think that's where Mack is buried.
Well, that's owned by the Albanos, and I've been over to that cemetery numerous times, because we brush hauled for that family over there. And there are a couple headstones over there that don't have any names on them. And according to the Albano family, they believe that one of them is Mack Marsden.
You know old white stones?
Pardon me?
Old white stones?
Yes.
You know Larry Lindhorst?
I do.
You ought to talk to him about that. Because I've seen pictures of that, and all I've ever seen is those 2 fairly new granite markers.
You didn't go, didn't you come out to visit Joel?
Yeah, a couple times.
You guys didn't go over to that cemetery?
No.
You didn't?
No.
Because Nick Albano is one of his best friends. He's got access to that farm at any time, if you ever wanted to go over and look at
Okay, there's a little fenced area.
it. Yes,
Are they inside that?
inside that.
Learn something.
I'm so glad I came today.
We are too.
Okay, are we about to wrap up? I know that we need to wrap this up and sell books and all that kind of thing.
I have one more
Yes,
comment
ma'am.
to your stories. We were talking about Louisa.
It's okay. I can live with
So
that.
who married?
Louisa
Yes,
Yerger,
Yerger.
married Martin Zephyr. After she married him, he didn't want her to take care of any of her children. Her children had been farmed out. And the oldest one is Mary Frederica.
Yes.
And she has a story, and I have the book on that one, that her family wrote. And that she tells who her family was. She talks about the different Yerger members of the family that still lived on. And the first Florian Yerger raised their youngest Joseph's son and my grandmother Louisa, great-grandmother Louisa. And so they were really spread out. And then she actually died in childbirth, Louisa did.
Yeah.
Died in childbirth when she was married to Martin Zephyr.
Right.
And then within 9 months, he was married again to that person.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
So he didn't want to raise any more children, so she wasn't, she didn't
And
have any
Mary
children.
wrote a book about it?
There was a lot of animosity about that in the family.
Mary wrote a book about it?
No, actually, it's Mary's relatives. It's the family, Joe Brown is the one who wrote
Yeah,
was
I know Joe Brown.
And Katie, his daughter, and his sister wrote the book for him because he died before he finished the book.
Yeah.
So I have the family book that tells the story about Mary Frederica and her relatives along through the line, which were the Bulmers.
Would you share that with me?
You'll have to make copies because there's only a minimum amount. I can show you the book, but I won't give it to you.
Let's talk about it and figure something out. Because I knew Joe and his wife,
Yeah.
Mary?
I didn't know her, but Mary was his sister.
Okay.
Mary
That's
Beth.
great. I'd love to know more about that. That's good. So I want to say one more thing. All this came from oral history, people telling stories. So then you go from there and find out what's true and what's not. But if you've got stories like this in your family, people will tell them through the years and the edges get whittled off and people forget things and make up things. But there's a nugget of truth there or they wouldn't be passing the story on. So I encourage you to get out there and see what you can find out and go backwards and reconstruct those stories like I did on this one. It's really worthwhile. So if you want a book, the books are all 24 except the Southern Cooking book, which is 21. And I don't have very many $1 bills to make change, but I can take credit cards and checks and so forth. So thank you very much for being here. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Let me hear from you.